One book, one extraordinary life. 48 chapters of saints, science, and the search for God.
I'm Kai.
And I'm Maya.
And this is our take on Autobiography of a Yogi, chapter by chapter.
A professor standing over a pile of papers, and he's already made a decision. One of them is going to fail. He's just decided which one.
Chapter 23. I receive my university degree. This is the chapter where academic life and spiritual life finally crash into each other, where the guy they call the mad monk barely scrapes through an entire education he was never really paying attention to in the first place.
So let's set the stage. Mukunda is at Serampore College now. He's studying various subjects: philosophy, English literature, Bengali, all of it. But his attendance is irregular. I mean, seriously irregular. His days are divided. Mornings and evenings at the ashram with Sri Yukteswar, days at college whenever he manages to show up. His teachers know he's brilliant. They know he's deeply intelligent. But they also know he's spiritually intoxicated, like completely devoted to something that isn't in any textbook. And mostly they treat him with kindness, not because he's easy to teach, but because they've given up. They've decided there's no point trying to make him conventional.
They call him the Mad Monk, and that nickname is perfect. It doesn't mean he's deranged. It doesn't mean he's dangerous. It just means everyone can see, very clearly, that he's devoted to something that isn't worldly, something that matters more to him than grades or credentials or fitting in.
But then comes Professor D.C. Ghoshal, and this man is different. He's rigid, he's stern. He doesn't have patience for spiritual intoxication. Mukunda writes that Ghoshal addresses him very sternly. He says, "You ignore your textbook assignments in philosophy. No doubt you are depending on an unlaborious intuition to get you through the examinations. But unless you apply yourself in a more scholarly manner, I shall see to it that you don't pass this course." That's not a warning. That's a threat.
And Mukunda adds a note that makes it even darker. He says the professor made it clear that no matter how brilliantly you answer, I will give you a failing grade. The decision has already been made. Before the exam is even written, before Mukunda even sits down at his desk, the professor has decided the outcome. He's decided Mukunda will fail.
And here's the thing. Mukunda has already used up most of his academic energy sitting at the ashram with his guru instead of sitting in lectures with the professor. He's barely set foot in Ghoshal's philosophy class. The professor knows it. Ghoshal knows that Mukunda has been spending his time somewhere else. And now the deadline is approaching. Finals are coming, and Mukunda is in actual trouble. This isn't like the other subjects where the teachers give him the benefit of the doubt. This is a professor who has decided to fail him no matter what.
So what does Mukunda do? He goes to Sri Yukteswar. But the master doesn't immediately solve the problem. He doesn't say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Instead, one night, about 11 o'clock, as Mukunda is putting on his shoes to write back to the boarding house, the master questions him gravely, "When do your AB examinations start?" And Mukunda answers, "5 days hence, sir." And Sri Yukteswar responds with something that sounds casual but lands with absolute weight. "I hope you are in readiness for them."
And Mukunda is terrified. He's transfixed with alarm. He's holding one shoe in the air, literally frozen mid-motion, and all he can think is, how am I supposed to be ready? 5 days? How is this possible? And he's feeling that the master's command is unreasonable. His interest is belated. There's no time. There's no way. He protests. He says, "Sir, you know how my days have been passed with you, rather than with the professors. How can I enact a farce by appearing for those difficult finals?"
And that's the real fear, isn't it? It's not just that he might fail. It's that showing up would be a performance. He'd be pretending he'd studied. He'd be pretending he was prepared. He'd be going through the motions of something he's actually failed at. And the master is asking him to do exactly that.
But then Sri Yukteswar does something unexpected. His eyes turn piercing on Mukunda. His tone goes cold and peremptory, and he says something that's not soft at all. "You must appear. We should not give cause for your father and other relatives to criticize your preference for ashram life. Just promise me that you will be present for the examinations. Answer them the best way you can." He's not coddling Mukunda. He's commanding him. And the reason isn't spiritual purity. It's practical. It's family. It's protecting Mukunda's reputation so his relatives won't use his failure as ammunition against ashram life.
And Mukunda starts crying. Real tears, uncontrollable tears. He's protesting that he hasn't had proper time to prepare, that this is unreasonable, that he's unworthy of this kind of expectation. And then, under his breath, he mutters something almost under his breath. "I will fill up the sheets with your teachings and answer to the questions." He's half joking, half desperate, making a prediction that sounds impossible. that he'll somehow channel the master's wisdom onto his exam papers.
And the master laughs. He laughs at Mukunda's woebegone air, and then he says something beautiful. He says, "Mukunda, has the Lord ever failed you at an examination or elsewhere?" And with those words, something shifts. Mukunda feels his burdens lift. The heavy weight that was crushing him a moment before suddenly becomes lighter, because the master isn't dismissing his fears. He's asking him to remember something deeper. If your consciousness is connected to the divine, if you truly believe that God is your source, what are you actually worried about?
But the master doesn't just leave it at philosophy. He's practical too. He adds something concrete. He says not laziness, but burning zeal for God has prevented you from seeking college honors. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. That's Matthew, the Christian Bible, right there in the Hermitage. The master quotes scripture while discussing a college exam. And then he tells Mukunda exactly what to do. Does your friend Romesh Chandra Dutt still live in your boarding house? And Mukunda says yes. And Sri Yukteswar says, get in touch with him. The Lord will inspire him to help you with the examinations.
Romesh will find time for you. Now go. That's it. That's the whole instruction. Get in touch with Romesh. That's all he needs to do.
So Mukunda returns to the Panthi. That's what they call the boarding house. And the first person he meets is the scholarly Romesh, the honor man in the class, the guy who carries a heavier course load than everyone else. Mukunda approaches him, and he's kind of doubtful. He says, hold on, Romesh. I know you're usually busy. You're the honor man in our class, and you carry a heavier course than the others. But I'm wondering if you could help me with the examinations. And Romesh, without hesitation, agrees. Obligingly, of course, I am at your service. And that's it. That's all it takes. A few words, a willingness.
And then Romesh spends hours with Mukunda, multiple afternoons, multiple evenings, going through the material, breaking down subjects, coaching him in various areas, marking out what he thinks will likely be set by the professors, going through practice questions, formulating sample questions that he thinks are likely to appear, day by day, question by question, preparing him for what's coming.
And then the day arrives. Mukunda sits for the examination in English literature, and he's nervous. His heart is racing. He looks at the questions on the sheet, and his first glance causes tears of gratitude to pour forth. The questions match Romesh's coaching almost exactly. Not approximately, almost exactly. The very questions that his friend had coached him on are right there on the paper, word for word. The exact areas that Romesh had emphasized. The exact topics that Romesh had predicted.
That's when Mukunda realizes something has happened that he can't explain through normal means. The professor, the timing, the content of the exam, Romesh's willingness, the match between the coaching and the questions, it's all too perfect. It's all been arranged. Not by him, not by Romesh, by someone else entirely, by the master. Sri Yukteswar somehow saw this entire pattern. He knew exactly what would happen. He knew that Romesh would coach him. He knew what questions would appear. He arranged it all with invisible hands. And Mukunda didn't see any of it happening until it was already done.
When he sat for the examination in English literature the following day, his first glance at the questions caused tears of gratitude to pour forth, wetting his paper. The classroom monitor came over, sympathetically, asking if he was okay. And Mukunda explained, my guru foretold that Romesh would help me. Look, the very questions dictated to me by Romesh are here on the examination sheet. He's not even hiding it. He's telling the truth right there in the middle of the exam. Fortunately for me, there are very few questions this year on English authors, whose lives are wrapped in deep mystery so far as I am concerned. He's basically saying, the master protected me by making sure the questions wouldn't be on the things I don't know.
His boarding house erupts. The boys who had been ridiculing Romesh's coaching method are looking at Mukunda in awe. Hardly deafening congratulations, but they know something miraculous has occurred. And the news spreads. The college hears about it. The story circulates that something resembling a miracle has occurred, and success seems probable for the absent-minded mad monk. The professors are powerless. The local professors are powerless to alter the questions, which had been arranged by Calcutta University.
But then comes the crisis. Mukunda is taking the English literature exam, and he realizes he's made a serious error. The section was divided into parts A and B and C and D, and the instructions were to answer one question from each part. But he carelessly answered both questions in Group 1. He failed to consider anything in Group 2, and he's immediately calculating. The best mark he could possibly score in that paper would be 33, 3 less than the passing mark of 36. So he's failed. It's mathematically impossible that he's passed this one.
And he's completely panicked now, because this one mistake might cost him everything. He rushes to the master. He pours out his troubles. He says, "Sir, I have made an unpardonable blunder. I don't deserve the divine blessings through Romesh. I am quite unworthy." He's offering himself up for judgment, expecting the master to tell him he's right, that he's failed, that there's nothing that can be done.
But Sri Yukteswar's response is completely different. His tones are light, unconcerned, almost amused, and he points to the blue vault of the heavens, and he says, "It is more possible for the sun and moon to interchange their positions in space than it is for you to fail in getting your degree." That's not hope. That's not a comforting statement. That's a cosmological fact. The sun and moon will never swap places in their orbits. Therefore, Mukunda will not fail. Therefore, he will get his degree. It's written. It's done. The master isn't saying he hopes so. He's saying it's more impossible for him to fail than for the celestial mechanics to reverse.
Mukunda leaves in a more tranquil mood, but he's still thinking, mathematically, this is inconceivable. How can I possibly pass? I've already made an error that costs me 3 points. How does that work?
And then he hears it. As he's walking back to the pantry, he overhears a classmate making a remark. I have just learned that this year, for the first time, the required passing mark in English literature has been lowered from 36 to 33. This year. Not last year, not next year, this year. The exact year that Mukunda needs it, and the exact drop that he needs, from 36 to 33. The difference between failure and passing.
And Mukunda realizes that this too has been arranged. The passing mark was lowered at precisely the moment it was needed. Not before, not after, exactly when he needed it. The master said it's more possible for the sun and moon to interchange than for him to fail, and the universe rearranged itself to match his words. The passing mark dropped. Of all the years and all the history of that exam, the passing mark dropped this year.
But there's also the Bengali examination, and this one is personal. The exam has 2 parts. The first asks him to write 2 instances of the charities of Vidya Sagar, this renowned Bengali philanthropist. And Mukunda, thanks to Ramesh, knows this material. He knows the stories. He knows the examples. As he transferred the knowledge to his paper, he whispered a few words of thanksgiving, because he had only recently acquired this knowledge. If the exam had been last year, he wouldn't have known it. But this year, he did. The knowledge was placed exactly when he needed it.
The second instruction on the sheet read, write an essay in Bengali on the life of the man who has most inspired you. And Mukunda knows exactly who that is. Sri Yukteswar. There's no question, there's no hesitation. The man who has inspired him most is his guru. And as he covered page after page with praise of Sri Yukteswar, with reflections on the master's teachings, with expressions of gratitude, he smiled. He realized that his muttered prediction was coming true. I will fill up the sheets with your teachings and answer to the questions. He had said that in a moment of desperation 5 days before. And here he was, literally writing his guru's teachings on an official university examination sheet.
And here's what's really interesting. His philosophy score ends up being the highest mark given to any of his papers. Philosophy, the subject where the professor had promised him failure. The one area where he had done the least conventional studying, where he hadn't attended class, where he had barely cracked the textbook. But he had his guru's teachings, and that was enough. In every other subject, his score was barely within the passing mark, barely scraping through. But philosophy, the one that mattered the most, that was brilliant.
So Mukunda graduates, and Ramesh graduates with honors, cum laude. The boarding house erupts. The boys who had been ridiculing him are now looking at him differently. Congratulations come from everywhere. During the weeks of examinations, Mukunda spent hours with Ramesh, and day by day, Ramesh's questions appeared on the sheets almost exactly as he had anticipated. It was a miracle. That's what they called it, a miracle.
But Mukunda knows the truth. It wasn't a miracle in the sense of something that breaks the laws of nature. It was something much more precise. It was the guru arranging the world around his disciples' development, not forcing anything, not demanding, just creating the conditions for success with invisible hands. Sri Yukteswar knew what questions would be asked. He knew Ramesh would help. He knew the passing mark would be lowered. He didn't tell Mukunda any of this. He just placed him in the position where he would naturally succeed.
And when Mukunda realizes one morning that he had made a serious error on the English literature exam, he realizes something else. He had actually answered both questions in Group 1, and he had failed to consider anything in Group 2. One of his friends had even told him, usually only 50% of the questions are about the books. The other half will involve the author's lives. But the passing mark was lowered that very year, and the questions didn't cover the author's lives. So Mukunda passed.
It's like Sri Yukteswar had arranged the entire universe around those exam questions. The professor, the content, the students, the passing mark, the timing, all of it. And Mukunda's only job was to show up and do his best.
And there's one more moment that's really beautiful. Mukunda's father attends the graduation, and he's smiling, proud of his son. But he also confesses something. I hardly thought you would pass, Mukunda. You spend so much time with your guru. There it is, the unspoken doubt, the criticism that the father couldn't quite articulate. And Sri Yukteswar had detected it perfectly. He had already noted the father's skepticism without anyone saying a word. The master knew.
On the day Mukunda received his degree from Calcutta University, he did something beautiful. He knelt at his guru's feet and thanked him for all the blessings flowing from his life into Mukunda's own. And Sri Yukteswar's response is perfect. He says indulgently, "Get up, Mukunda. The Lord simply found it more convenient to make you a graduate than to rearrange the sun and moon." He's joking about his own prophecy. The thing he said with absolute certainty, the sun and moon would never interchange. So instead, the Lord made Mukunda a graduate, the easier option.
For years afterward, Mukunda is uncertain that he would ever see the day when an AB would follow his name. He seldom uses the title without reflecting that it was a divine gift, conferred for reasons somewhat obscure. And he admits his academic deficiencies. College men often remark that very little of their cramped knowledge remained after graduation, and that admission consoles him a bit for his undoubted academic negligence. The degree wasn't the point. The teaching was. The transmission was. The guru's love was.
Here's what keeps hitting me about this chapter. The bond between guru and disciple needs no words. Sri Yukteswar didn't lecture Mukunda about discipline. He didn't make him cram all night. He didn't sit him down and teach him philosophy so he could beat Ghoshal at his own game. He just quietly arranged everything. He placed Ramesh in Mukunda's path at exactly the right moment. He knew the questions before they were written. He somehow influenced the passing mark to be lowered. He held Mukunda's consciousness within his own so firmly that failure became impossible. Not through magic, through precision.
Through seeing the entire pattern of cause and effect that ordinary minds can't perceive. A master can see your entire life, can see the obstacles, can see the solutions, can move through time and circumstance with such invisible grace that you don't even notice you've been saved until it's already happened.
And next time, the story shifts again. Mukunda is approaching something huge, a turning point, because the next chapter, chapter 24, is when he becomes a monk. The hermitage life becomes his whole life. College is behind him. The world of family, of worldly expectations, all of that is behind him. What comes next is the full commitment, the vow, the ordination into the monastic life.
The bond that needs no words is about to be tested in a completely different way, because becoming a monk isn't about passing exams. It's about surrendering everything.
See you next time.